Otis stood in the center of the nursery, clutching the paternity test like it was a live grenade. He looked at me, waiting for the tears, the screaming, the collapse. He wanted the satisfaction of breaking me. Instead, I just took a slow sip of my iced latte and checked my watch. He thought he was dropping a bomb, but he didn't realize I'd already cut the wire 3 months ago. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from, or what time it is for you. The phone rang at exactly 3:14 p.m. I know this because I was staring at the digital clock on the baby monitor, praying for the minute to change so I could justify taking a break. I was on my knees in the center of the nursery, surrounded by a mountain of pastel laundry. It was the nesting phase, or that's what the books called it. To me, it felt more like panic-induced organization. I was folding a tiny yellow onesie, one of those expensive bamboo cotton ones that feel like woven butter. It was ridiculous, honestly. Who spends $30 on a shirt that's going to get covered in spit up within 20 minutes? Apparently I did. I smoothed the fabric over my thigh, the bump of my 8-month pregnancy making everything a geometric challenge. The room smelled like gentle morning fabric softener and fresh paint. We had gone with a color called Quiet Rain, which was just a fancy way of saying light gray. I smiled, imagining a little boy in this yellow suit, rolling around on the rug. Then the phone cut through the daydream. It wasn't my usual ringtone. I had set specific tones for everyone. Otis had the Star Wars Imperial March, a joke that stopped being funny 3 years ago. My mom had a harp sound. This was the default jarring electronic trill of an unknown number. I sighed, the sound heavy in the empty room. Hoisting myself up was a production. I had to plant one hand on the changing table, the other on my lower back, and leverage my weight like I was operating a construction crane. My knees popped, a wet, cracking sound that made me wince. I waddled over to the dresser where the phone was vibrating against the wood, threatening to buzz itself right off the edge. "Hello?" I answered on speaker, not bothering to lift it. I was out of breath just from standing up. "Is this Mrs. Zoe Miller?" The voice was male, deep, and striped of any human warmth. It sounded like paperwork. It sounded like a badge. "Speaking," I said, instinctively straightening my spine. "Who is this?" "This is Trooper Davis with the Georgia State Patrol. I'm calling regarding your husband, Otis Miller." The world didn't stop. That's a lie they tell you in movies. The world kept going. The air conditioner hummed. A dog barked outside. The dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight hitting the crib. But my blood turned into slush. "Is he—" I couldn't finish the sentence. My hand hovered over my belly, a shield. "He's been involved in a motor vehicle collision on the I-75 southbound, just past the Marietta Loop," the trooper said. He was reading from a script. I could hear the rustle of a notebook. "He has been transported to Emory University Hospital, Midtown." "Is he alive?" I barked the question. The politeness vanished. There was a pause, a static hiss on the line. "Yes, ma'am. He is currently stable, but he sustained injuries." "I'm coming," I said, my hand shaking as I reached for my keys. "Ma'am, just drive carefully," the trooper added, and then his voice shifted. It became a fraction less robotic, which was somehow terrifying. "And Mrs. Miller, when you get there, check in at the main desk. He wasn't the only one in the vehicle." I froze, my fingers curled around the cold metal of my car keys. "What?" I asked. "He's in sales." "Was he with a client?" "We don't have the full details on the passenger's relationship to the driver yet," the trooper said, retreating back into his official monotone. "Just that the female passenger has also been admitted for observation. You should head over." The line went dead. I stood there for 10 seconds. The female passenger. Otis sold luxury SUVs. He drove clients around all the time. It was a Tuesday. He had a test drive scheduled for 2 p.m. I knew this because I checked his Google Calendar like a hawk, not out of suspicion, but because I needed to know if he'd be home for dinner or if I should order Thai food for one. It's a client, I told myself. It's just a rich lady from Buckhead who wanted to see how the suspension handled the interstate. But as I looked down at the yellow onesie still lying on the floor, a cold, oily dread started to pool in my stomach. It wasn't the fear of him dying. It was something else. A primitive alarm bell ringing in the back of my lizard brain. He wasn't alone. I slammed the front door so hard the wreath rattled against the wood. The elevator ride down to the parking garage took 3 years. I stared at my reflection in the brushed steel doors. I looked like a ghost carrying a watermelon. My face was blotchy. My hair was in a messy bun that was more mess than bun. And my eyes were wide, frantic saucers. My car, a practical Honda CR-V that Otis called the Mom Mobile, was parked in spot 402. I fumbled the ignition, dropping the keys once between the seat and the center console. I let out a scream, a short guttural sound of pure frustration, and clawed them out, scraping my cuticle until it bled. When I finally pulled out onto the street, the sky had decided to match my mood. It was raining. Not a cleanse-the-earth rain, but that gross, humid Atlanta mist that turns the roads into a greased skillet. I turned onto 14th Street, and of course, it was gridlock. "Come on," I whispered, gripping the steering wheel. "Move, just move." The wipers slashed back and forth. Thwack, hiss, thwack, hiss. The rhythm was hypnotic and nauseating. I hit a red light at Peachtree Street. It was one of those lights that feels personal. It stayed red, and stayed red. I watched the digital clock on the dashboard. 3:28 p.m., 3:29 p.m. "Go!" I yelled, slamming my palm against the horn. The guy in the BMW in front of me threw his hands up in the rearview mirror, mouthing something that definitely wasn't, "God bless you." My chest felt tight. I rolled down the window, needing air. The smell of wet asphalt and exhaust fumes filled the car. I took jagged breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. That's what the prenatal yoga instructor Nina always said. Nina, my neighbor, my friend, the woman who lived in 4B. The woman who had brought me ginger tea last week when my morning sickness made a surprise 3rd trimester comeback. Focus, Zoe. Otis was hurt. He was in a hospital bed. He was probably scared. He needed his wife. He didn't need me having a panic attack in traffic because a cop said, "female passenger," and my insecure brain decided to write a soap opera. The light turned green. I floored it, the Honda lurching forward with a whine. I drove aggressively, weaving lanes in a way that would have made Otis lecture me about defensive driving mechanics. Every time I braked, I felt the seatbelt dig into the underside of my belly. The baby kicked hard, a distinct thud against my ribs. "I know, kiddo," I muttered, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. "I'm sorry, hang on." The trooper's voice looped in my head. He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. Why did he say it like that? If it was a client, he would have said, "the other victim," or "the passenger." But he paused. He made it sound distinct. I merged onto the connector, cutting off a delivery truck. The hospital skyline loomed ahead, gray concrete against a gray sky. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, smearing mascara across my cheekbone. I needed to pull it together. I needed to be the stoic wife, the rock. I couldn't walk into the ER looking like a hysterical mess, but my hands were shaking so bad the steering wheel felt like it was vibrating on its own. You know that smell? The one that hits you the second the automatic sliding doors part at an emergency room? It's a cocktail of industrial floor wax, stale coffee, rubbing alcohol, and fear. It coated the back of my throat instantly. Emory Midtown was chaos. It was a Tuesday afternoon, which meant the waiting room was a mixture of true emergencies and people who had been waiting 6 hours for a Tylenol. I navigated through the crowd, shielding my belly with my purse. A man coughing a wet, rattling cough sat near the entrance. I held my breath as I passed him. The reception desk was behind a high plexiglass wall, a relic of the pandemic that never went away. Behind it sat a woman who looked like she would rather be anywhere else in the known universe. She had long, intricate acrylic nails that clicked against the keyboard like tap shoes. "I need to find my husband," I said, leaning on the counter. I was out of breath again. Otis Miller. He was brought in from a car accident on I-75. The receptionist didn't look up immediately. She finished typing a sentence, then slowly peeled her eyes away from the screen. She looked at my stomach, then at my face. "Last name?" "Miller," I said, spelling it out. M-I-L-L-E-R, Otis. She typed. Click, clack, click, clack. Then she paused. Then she frowned. "I'm not seeing an Otis Miller in the main intake," she said, popping a gum bubble. "He has to be here," I insisted, my voice rising an octave. "The state trooper called me 20 minutes ago. They said Emory Midtown. Accident. I-75. Honey, unless he's John Doe, he ain't in my system yet," she said, not unkindly, but with a maddening lack of urgency. Sometimes the EMTs are slow with the paperwork if it's a trauma. Trauma? The word tasted like copper. "They said he was stable." "Stable just means he ain't dying right this second," she said, turning back to the screen. "Wait, here we go, just popped up. Trauma Bay 4. Move to ER Hallway B, Bed 4. "Where is that?" "Through those double doors, take a left, follow the red line on the floor until you see the station." "Thank you," I gasped, already moving. "Wait, ma'am," she called out. I stopped, turning back. "You got his insurance card? ID?" I have mine. He's my husband." "You need to see the intake nurse first. You can't just run back there." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter the plexiglass, but I nodded. I walked over to the secondary desk she pointed to. My legs felt like lead pipes. Every step sent a jolt of pain through my lower back. People were staring. The pregnant lady with the mascara running down her face. I could feel their pity like a physical weight. "Oh, look, poor thing. Something bad happened." I hated them. I hated their pity. I just wanted to see Otis. I wanted to see him smile his goofy, charming smile and tell me he just scratched the bumper and he was sorry he scared me. A nurse in blue scrubs intercepted me before I could get to the hallway. She looked exhausted, her ponytail fraying at the edges. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked, glancing at a clipboard. "Yes. Is he okay? Can I see him?" "Dr. Patel is with him right now, setting a fracture in his arm. He's sedated but conscious. Before you go in, we have his personal effects." She handed me a clear plastic drawstring bag. It was heavy. I took it, my hands trembling. It felt like I was holding his remains, even though I knew he was alive. Through the plastic, I saw the familiar brown leather of his wallet, the one I bought him for our 2nd anniversary. His watch, the Tag Heuer he was so proud of. His iPhone, the screen shattered in a spiderweb pattern, and a crumpled piece of paper. I don't know why I focused on the paper. Maybe because it looked out of place among the leather and metal. I pulled the drawstring open. I reached in, bypassing the wallet, and pulled out the receipt. It was wrinkled, stained with a dark spot that might have been coffee or blood. I smoothed it out against the top of my purse. Pandora Jewelry, Lenox Mall. Date today. Time, 12:45 p.m. Item, silver charm, infinity heart. Price, $65. I stared at the numbers. 12:45 p.m. He had texted me at 12:30 p.m. saying he was slammed with inventory and eating a sandwich at his desk. "A charm?" I whispered. I didn't have a charm bracelet. I hated charm bracelets. I thought they were tacky, clangy little annoyances that caught on sweaters. Otis knew that. We had a whole conversation about it when his sister asked for one last Christmas. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, a safe explanation. Maybe it's for his mom? No, her birthday was in October. Maybe it's a push present? For the baby? A charm for a baby? That didn't make sense. And an infinity heart? That was romantic, not maternal. "Is this everything?" I asked the nurse, my voice sounding hollow. "That was in his pockets, yes, ma'am." I looked at the receipt again. Maybe he bought it for me, thinking I'd change my mind. Maybe he was trying to be sweet and just got it wrong. Otis was terrible at gifts. He once bought me a vacuum cleaner for Valentine's Day. He was buying a stupid charm while telling me he was working. The female passenger line from the trooper slammed back into my thoughts. Who was he with? I asked the nurse. The trooper said there was a passenger. The nurse's face did a thing, a microspasm of discomfort. She looked over my shoulder, avoiding eye contact. I can't disclose information about other patients, ma'am. HIPAA regulations. I don't need her medical history, I snapped, the pregnancy hormones finally taking the wheel. I need to know if she's okay. Was it a client? She's being treated. She's in the bed next to him in the bay. It's a shared room. Next to him. I gripped the plastic bag tighter. The receipt crinkled in my fist. It was a stranger. It had to be a stranger. A client he was trying to impress with a quick stop at the mall? No, that was insane. I need to sit down, I said. Just give us 5 minutes. The doctor is finishing up the splint, the nurse said, guiding me toward a row of chairs against the wall. Sit, breathe. You're flushing. I sat. The chair was hard plastic, molded into a shape that no human spine actually possesses. There was a dark, sticky stain on the floor near my left foot. Probably soda, but in the hospital lighting it looked sinister. I checked my phone. 3:55 p.m., 5 minutes. I watched a family across the aisle. A mom, a dad, and a kid about 6 years old. The kid was eating flamin' hot Cheetos. I could smell the artificial spice from here. He was licking the red dust off his fingers, one by one. Did you remember to shut the garage? The dad asked, staring at the ceiling. I think so, the mom said. She was scrolling through TikTok. I hit the button. You always say you hit the button. Don't start, Gary. Not here. Their banality was suffocating. How could they be arguing about a garage door when my entire life felt like it was balancing on a tightrope? I looked down at the bag in my lap. The receipt was still there. 12:45 p.m., Lenox Mall. Lenox was nowhere near his dealership. He would have had to drive 30 minutes out of his way. Why lie about eating a sandwich? Because he was buying a surprise, I tried to tell myself. He was getting you a gift. He lied so you wouldn't know. But the female passenger. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the wall. The baby kicked again, a restless flutter. It's okay, I whispered to my belly. Daddy's okay. We're just paranoid. I tried to summon the image of Otis, his laugh, the way he rubbed my feet last night while we watched Netflix. He loved me. He was excited about this baby. He had painted the nursery himself. He wasn't that guy. He wasn't the guy who lies about where he is. But then I remembered the phone. Lately, he'd been taking his phone into the bathroom when he showered. He said he liked to listen to podcasts. Did he listen to podcasts? I never heard voices coming from the bathroom, just the water running. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. Mrs. Miller? I jumped. A different nurse was standing there. This one was older, wearing a formidable pair of squeaky Crocs and an expression that said she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. Yes? I struggled to stand up again. Come with me. The walk down the hall felt like marching to a sentencing hearing. The lights were too bright, humming with a frequency that made my teeth hurt. I'm head nurse Brenda, the woman said, her stride brisk. Your husband got lucky. Distal radius fracture, some cracked ribs, lacerations from the airbag. But his head is clear. He's loopy from the pain meds, but he's clear. Thank you, I breathed. Thank God. We reached a station, a circular desk in the middle of the hallway cluttered with monitors and stacks of paper. I need to verify some info before you go in, Brenda said. She picked up a metal clipboard. Insurance is Cigna, right? Yes. Okay. Sign here, acknowledging you're the primary contact. She pushed the clipboard toward me on the high counter. I took the pen, my hand shaking so bad I could barely hold it. I signed my name, Zoe Miller. Then my eyes drifted up. The clipboard wasn't just a consent form. It was a patient census for Bay 4. It was a handwritten grid, probably used by the nurses for quick reference during shift changes. Bed 4A. Miller Otis, MVC driver, stable. Bed 4B. Caldwell Nina, MVC passenger, stable, obs. I stopped breathing. The pen slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the desk. Caldwell Nina. No, it couldn't be. Nina Caldwell. Apartment 4B, the woman with the yoga mats and the perfect matcha lattes. The woman who was married to Keith, the nicest, quietest guy in the building. Nina, who told me 3 days ago she was going to visit her sister in Savannah this week. "Ma'am?" Nurse Brenda asked, looking at me. "You okay?" I stared at the letters. N-I-N-A. The world tilted on its axis. The smells of the hospital, the floor wax, the blood, the coffee, suddenly coalesced into a wave of nausea so violent I had to grip the counter to keep from vomiting. "Who is in bed 4B?" I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Brenda looked at the clipboard, then at me. She hesitated. She saw the recognition in my eyes. "That's the passenger," she said slowly. "Minor injuries. Concussion protocol. Is she—" I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Is she blonde? Small? About 30? Brenda's face softened into something resembling pity, and that was the worst thing I had ever seen. "Yes, honey, she is." The receipt, the charm bracelet, the sandwich at 12:45 p.m., the phone in the bathroom, the sister in Savannah. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a client. Otis wasn't driving a customer. He was driving our neighbor, and he wasn't just driving her. You don't buy a $65 heart charm for your neighbor on a Tuesday afternoon. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and tingling. My knees buckled. "Whoa, okay, sit down," Brenda said, coming around the desk. She grabbed my arm with a grip like iron. "I'm fine," I lied. I wasn't fine. I was dying. The Otis I knew, the husband, the father-to-be, had just died on that clipboard. He said he was at work," I whispered. It was a stupid thing to say, a weak thing. "Men say a lot of things," Brenda said, her voice dropping low, conspiratorial. "You take a minute. You don't have to go in there yet." "No," I said. I straightened up. The nausea was still there, but it was hardening into something else, something sharp. "I want to see him, now." "And the other one?" Brenda asked. "She's right next to him, just a curtain between them." "Good," I said. "I want to see her too." I stood rooted to the spot in front of the nurse's station, my hand still hovering over that damn clipboard. My brain was performing a forensic audit of the last 6 months, rewinding the tape of my life and playing it back with a new, sickening filter. Nina Caldwell. Suddenly, random Tuesday mornings made sense. The way she would accidentally bump into me at the mailboxes, asking, "So, is Otis traveling again this week? You must be so lonely." I remembered the Saturday 2 weeks ago. I was in the kitchen, swollen ankles propped up on a chair, eating ice cream out of the carton. The doorbell rang. It was Nina. She was wearing those expensive Lululemon leggings that cost more than my car payment and a sports bra that showed off her terrifyingly flat stomach. "Hey, girl," she had chirped, holding an empty mug. "I am so sorry to bother you, but Keith bought the wrong almond milk again. Sweetened, can you believe it? And I need a splash of the unsweetened stuff for my smoothie. Do you mind?" I had let her in. I had smiled. I had poured her the milk. She had leaned against my quartz countertop, sipping the milk I gave her, and looked at my belly. "You're getting so big, Zoe. It's magical, isn't it? The connection?" She had reached out and touched my stomach. I felt the phantom sensation of her cold hand on my skin right there in the hospital hallway. It made my skin crawl. It wasn't a friendly touch. It was a claim. She wasn't feeling the baby. She was feeling the consequences of the man she was sleeping with. She was testing the perimeter of the life she was helping to dismantle. "Mrs. Miller?" Nurse Brenda's voice cut through the fog. "You look like you're going to pass out. Do you want some juice?" "No," I said, my voice sounding like gravel. "I don't want juice." I looked at the clipboard one last time. Bed 4B, Nina Caldwell. She wasn't in Savannah. She was in a car with my husband on a Tuesday afternoon, heading north on I-75. They weren't going to a client meeting. They weren't going to a dealership event. The receipt, the charm bracelet. It was for her. The rage didn't hit me like a fire. It hit me like ice. It started at the base of my spine and froze me solid. I felt calm, terrifyingly calm. "I'm going in," I said. "Honey, maybe wait for the doctor." Brenda started. I said, "I'm going in." Hallway B was a tunnel of misery. The linoleum was scuffed with black rubber marks from gurney wheels, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered with a low, maddening buzz that sounded like a trapped fly. Every step was a labor. My sneakers, Brooks Ghosts, size 8 wide because my feet were sausages, squeaked against the floor. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was the only sound in the world. I walked past other bays. Bay 1 had an old man coughing into an oxygen mask. Bay 2 was empty, except for a tangled mess of sheets. Bay 3 had a teenager with a bloody nose holding an ice pack and scrolling on his phone with his free hand. It felt like a procession. The dead woman walking. My belly led the way, this heavy, cumbersome drum containing an innocent boy who was currently kicking my bladder like it was a speed bag. I put a hand on him. "Don't move," I thought. "Don't move while Mommy handles this." I reached the end of the hall. The sign said, "Observation Bay 4." The curtain was green, a sickly pale green that reminded me of cafeteria peas. It was drawn shut, but not all the way. There was a 6-inch gap. I stopped. I could hear breathing, 2 different rhythms. One was a soft, jagged snore. Otis. He always snored when he was on his back. I used to nudge him, roll him over, kiss his shoulder. Now the sound just made me want to scream. The other breathing was quiet, awake. I stared at the gap in the curtain, my hand raised to grab the fabric. My fingers were trembling, not from fear anymore, but from adrenaline. I was a wire pulled so tight I was humming. I took a breath that smelled of disinfectant and other people's pain. Then I ripped the curtain back. The metal rings of the curtain shrieked against the rod. Shh, clack. The sound was violent in the quiet room, and there they were. It was an image that would be burned into my retinas until the day I died. 2 narrow hospital beds pushed uncomfortably close together due to the lack of space. On the left, Otis. He looked small. That was my first thought. My big, confident sales director husband looked like a broken toy. His left arm was encased in a temporary white plaster splint, elevated on a pillow. There was a butterfly bandage on his cheekbone and a purpling bruise blooming across his forehead like a storm cloud. He was asleep, mouth slightly open, looking defenseless. On the right, less than 4 feet away, Nina. She was propped up slightly. She looked rough. Her blonde hair, usually blown out to perfection, was matted with blood on the left side. There was a thick gauze pad taped over her eyebrow. She was wearing a hospital gown that washed out her complexion, making her look gray and fragile. But it was the intimacy of the scene that gutted me. They weren't just 2 patients in a room. Otis's good hand, his right hand, was dangling off the side of his mattress, reaching across the gap. It wasn't touching Nina, but it was aimed at her. Like even in his sedated state, his body was magnetic to hers. And on the bedside table between them, amidst the tangle of IV tubes and plastic cups of water, lay 2 phones. Side by side, his shattered iPhone and her rose gold one. They looked like a couple. They looked like a unit that had survived a war together, and I was the intruder. I was the foreign element standing in the doorway with my pregnant belly and my sensible shoes. Nina turned her head slowly when the curtain opened. Her eyes were glassy, probably from painkillers, but they widened when they locked onto mine. Recognition? Panic? She didn't speak. She just blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. If I looked at her, I would lunge across that gap and do something that would get me arrested. I looked at Otis. "Wake up!" I said. I didn't scream it. I said it with the flat, dead tone of a GPS giving directions. "Wake up, Otis!" He stirred. A groan rumbled in his chest, a pathetic sound. His eyelids fluttered, fighting the heavy pull of the Dilaudid or whatever cocktail they had pumped into him. He blinked once, twice. His eyes were unfocused, swimming in a druggy haze. He looked at the ceiling tiles first. Then he rolled his head to the right, toward Nina. He saw her. A flicker of something, concern, love, crossed his face. Then he rolled his head to the left, and he saw me. The transformation was instantaneous. The drug haze evaporated under the sheer shock of adrenaline. His eyes snapped wide. He tried to sit up, but his broken arm anchored him down, and he let out a sharp hiss of pain. "Zoe?" His voice was a croak. "Zoe? You're here." "I'm here," I said, stepping fully into the room. The space was too small. My belly brushed against the foot of his bed. The state trooper called me. Otis swallowed hard. I could see his Adam's apple bob. He licked his dry lips, his eyes darting frantically from me to Nina and back to me. The gears in his head were grinding, stripping metal, trying to build a lie in real time. "Baby," he started, forcing a weak smile that looked more like a grimace. I was so worried about you. I didn't want you to get the call. I told them not to scare you." "Save it," I said. "No, listen," he rushed on, the words tumbling out over each other. "It was crazy. I was heading to the north lot to check on some inventory, and I saw Nina. She was stranded on the side of the road. Her car broke down. I was just giving her a lift to the mechanic. Being a good neighbor, you know?" The lie was so stupid, so lazy, it was almost insulting. "To the mechanic?" I repeated. "On I-75, heading away from our neighborhood, away from the dealership?" "There's a specialist," he stammered, "for her vintage car. You know she has that old—" "She drives a 2022 Lexus, Otis," I said. "It has roadside assistance." He froze. He had forgotten. Or maybe he just assumed I was too stupid to know what car my neighbor drove. She was panicked. He tried again, sweat beading on his upper lip. "She called me. She was crying. What was I supposed to do? Leave her there?" "She called you?" I asked. "Strange, because I found your phone in your bag." And the last call in the log was to Client Steve at 11 p.m. I didn't mention that I knew Steve was probably a code name. I just let the discrepancy hang there. "Zoe, please," he whined, reaching out with his good hand. "My arm is broken. I'm in pain. Can we not do this right now? I was just helping her." "Zoe?" The voice came from the other bed. It was weak, breathy, and laced with a terrifying amount of feigned innocence. I turned slowly to look at Nina. She had pushed herself up further against the pillows. She was clutching the thin hospital blanket to her chest, her eyes wide and wet. She looked like a wounded deer. If I didn't know better, I would have felt sorry for her. "Oh my God, Zoe," she rasped. "I'm so sorry. This is a nightmare." "Is it?" I asked. "I feel terrible," she continued, ignoring my tone. "Otis was just being such a sweetheart. I was stranded, and I didn't know who else to call. And Keith... You know Keith doesn't answer his phone when he's at the site. Otis really saved me." She looked at him with a soft, grateful expression that made my stomach turn over. "And then the truck. It just came out of nowhere," she added, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm just so glad he's okay. When I saw the airbag go off, I just thought about you, and the baby." She looked at my stomach. "I was praying for your baby, Zoe." The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall of this woman. to invoke my unborn child in her lie. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, a manic, jagged thing. "You were praying for my baby?" I asked, stepping closer to her bed. "While you were riding shotgun in my husband's car, 20 miles from where either of you were supposed to be. That's some multitasking, Nina." "Zoe, don't be like that," Otis interjected from his bed, his voice taking on that scolding tone he used when I spent too much money at Target. "She's hurt. She has a head injury." "Don't attack her." "I'm not attacking anyone," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm just confused. See, the trooper said something interesting." I looked back and forth between them. They were tense, waiting for the blow. He said he wasn't alone. He didn't say he was with a neighbor he rescued. He made it sound implicated. "Cops don't know the context," Otis scoffed. "He's just a grunt." "Right, context," I said, "like the context of why you were at Lenox Mall at 12:45 p.m. The air left the room. It didn't just thin out, it vanished. Otis stopped moving. His hand, which had been reaching for me again, dropped to the sheet. "What?" he whispered. I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out the bag of effects. I just pulled out the receipt. I had crumpled it in my fist, but I smoothed it out now against my palm. "I went through your bag, Otis," I said casually. "The nurse gave it to me. Wallet, keys, phone, and this." I held it up. The thermal paper was flimsy, but the damning text was clear. "Pandora, Lenox Mall, 12:45 p.m., a silver infinity heart charm, $65. I turned the receipt so he could see it. Then I turned it toward Nina. Nina's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes darted to Otis, a look of pure panic. "You didn't throw it away?" That look screamed. "Now," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I don't have a Pandora bracelet. You know I hate them. You told me they were tacky junk last Christmas." I looked at Nina's wrist. It was bare. But on the bedside table, next to her phone, was a small pile of jewelry the nurses had removed. A watch, a pair of stud earrings, and a silver snake chain bracelet with about 5 charms on it. "Oh," I said. "There it is." I walked over to the table. Otis tried to shout, "Zoe, don't!" But it came out as a weak gurgle. I picked up the bracelet. It clinked in my hand. I didn't see the infinity heart on it. "Where is it, Otis?" I asked, turning back to him. "Is it in the car? Did it get lost in the crash? Or is it in your pocket?" It was for my mom," he lied. He was desperate now. "For her birthday. I was buying it early." "Your mom wears gold, Otis. Exclusively. She's allergic to silver. You told me that on our first date." I dropped the bracelet back onto the table. It made a loud clatter. "So let's cut the Good Samaritan act," I said. "You weren't rescuing a neighbor. You were on a date. A cheap Tuesday afternoon date at the mall, followed by a drive." "Zoe, you're crazy," Otis spat, anger replacing the fear now that he was cornered. "You're hormonal and you're making up scenarios. I was helping a friend. And you," I looked at Nina, "you were praying for my baby? You were probably helping him pick out the charm." "I didn't," Nina sobbed. "I didn't know." "Stop," I said. "Just stop lying. It's insulting." The trooper knew. The nurse knew. And now I know. I stepped back, away from the beds. I felt dirty just being near them. "I need air," I said. You two deserve each other's company." "Zoe, if you walk out that door," Otis threatened, trying to sit up again. "If I walk out that door, what?" I challenged him. "You'll chase me? Good luck with that." I turned on my heel. I needed to get out before I started screaming or crying or throwing heavy medical equipment. "Zoe!" he yelled. I didn't look back. I walked out through the green curtain, the sound of the ring sliding against the metal rod marking the end of my marriage. I walked until I hit a wall, literally, I marched straight down hallway B, past the nurse's station, past the vending machines humming with electrical apathy, and didn't stop until my shoulder collided with the cold concrete near the emergency exit. I gasped, the air rushing back into my lungs in a painful, jagged rhythm. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the confrontation was starting to curdle into a deep, vibrating exhaustion. My knees felt like they were held together by water tension. I leaned back against the wall, sliding down just an inch to relieve the pressure on my lower spine. The hospital was loud, gurneys rattling, pagers beeping, a woman somewhere yelling about insurance copays, but inside my head, it was dead silent, just the echo of Otis's lie. To the mechanic. I looked down at my phone. It was still clutched in my hand, the screen dark. I had a choice. I could leave. I could get in my Honda, drive back to the apartment, pack a bag, and disappear to my mother's house in Savannah. I could let them have their little hospital honeymoon. I could send a lawyer next week. That was the dignified route. That was the high road. But then I thought about the yellow onesie. I thought about the nursery I had spent weekends painting. I thought about the $65 on that receipt. He wasn't just cheating. He was humiliating me. He was stripping me of my reality, telling me the sky was green while he screwed the neighbor, and Nina, praying for my baby. The high road was for people who hadn't been stabbed in the back by the woman who borrowed their sugar. I unlocked my phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. I scrolled past Mom, past Pizza Hut, down to the K's. Keith Caldwell. We weren't close. We were mailbox friends. We waved in the parking garage. We made small talk about the HOA fees and the weather. I knew he was a site manager for a construction firm. I knew he liked the Falcons. I knew he worked hard. Otis always made fun of him for driving a beat-up Ford F-150 instead of a luxury vehicle. He was a good guy, quiet, dependable, the kind of guy who probably thought his wife was at her sister's house right now. I felt a pang of guilt. I was about to nuke this man's life. I was about to drop a bomb on his Tuesday afternoon that would leave a crater where his marriage used to be. But looking at that closed curtain down the hall, realizing they were probably whispering their next lie right now, the guilt evaporated. He had a right to know. If the roles were reversed, I would want to know. I hit the call button. The phone rang. Brrr. Brrr. I pressed it to my ear, staring out the narrow window of the emergency exit door. It was still raining, the water streaking the glass like tears. Hello? His voice was deep, distracted. I could hear background noise, industrial beeping, maybe a forklift. Keith, it's Zoe from 4A. There was a pause. He was probably confused why the pregnant neighbor was calling him at 4:15 p.m. on a workday. Oh, hey, Zoe, is everything okay? Did a package get delivered to our door again? I can ask Nina to grab it when she gets back from... He trailed off. When she gets back from Savannah. My throat tightened. No, Keith, it's not a package. Okay. Is the water leaking again? Because I told the super that the pipes in 4B were... Keith, listen to me. I cut him off. I needed to be surgical. If I cried, he wouldn't understand. I need you to come to Emory Midtown Hospital, right now. The background noise on his end seemed to stop, or maybe he just walked into a quiet room. Emory? Why? Is it the baby? Do you need a ride? Is Otis not answering? The concern in his voice, genuine, immediate concern for me, made me want to vomit. He was such a decent human being, and he was married to a snake. Otis is here, I said, choosing my words carefully. He was in a car accident on I-75. Oh my God, Keith breathed. Is he okay? That's terrible, Zoe. I'm so sorry. He's alive. He's stable, I said. But Keith, he wasn't alone in the car. What do you mean? The passenger, I said, looking down the hallway toward Bay 4. The passenger was also admitted. She's in the bed next to him. Silence. Long, heavy, static-filled silence. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. I let the silence do the work. I let his brain connect the dots that didn't fit. The sister in Savannah, the unanswerable phone calls, the late nights. Zoe, he said finally. His voice sounded different. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. Who is the passenger? You need to come see for yourself, I said. I'm in the ER waiting area near hallway B. Just hurry. I'm leaving the site now, he said. I'm 20 minutes out. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking again. I had just pulled the pin. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. Ma'am? Excuse me, ma'am? I looked up. It wasn't Brenda this time. It was a younger nurse, maybe in her mid-20s, wearing pink scrubs and a messy bun held together by a pencil. She had a no visitors sign tucked under her arm and a look of apologetic enforcement on her face. You can't stand here by the exit, she said gently, and we actually need to clear out the observation bays for shift change in about 10 minutes. If your husband is stable, we might be moving him upstairs, so you'll have to go to the main waiting room. I can't leave, I said. I know it's stressful, she said, stepping closer, but policy is policy. You can wait in the lobby. We'll call you when he's settled in a room. No, I said, shaking my head. You don't understand. I'm waiting for someone. Visitors are limited to one per patient in the ER right now, she recited, tapping a laminated card on her lanyard. And you're already the +1. I looked at her, really looked at her. She had kind eyes, but she was tired. She just wanted to follow the rules and go home. Look, I said, stepping away from the wall so I could lower my voice. My husband is in Bay 4, with a broken arm. Okay. The woman in the bed next to him, in Bay 4B? The nurse nodded slowly. The accident victim. Yes. That's his mistress, I whispered. The word tasted like ash. And her husband is on his way here right now because he thinks she's visiting her sister in Savannah. The nurse's eyes went wide. She stopped tapping her lanyard. Her mouth formed a perfect O. Oh, shit, she breathed. Professionalism momentarily forgotten. Yeah, I said, leaning back against the wall. Oh, shit. So I'm not going to the waiting room. I'm going to stand right here until her husband gets off the elevator, and then we are going to go in there together. Because if I go to the lobby, I might actually lose my mind. The nurse looked at me. She looked at my belly. She looked down the hall toward Bay 4, where Otis and Nina were lying. She let out a long breath through her nose. Okay, she said. Okay? I didn't see you, she said, turning her back to me and fiddling with a cart of IV fluids. I'm going to go check inventory in the supply closet for about 30 minutes. Shift change is chaotic. Sometimes people slip through the cracks. She glanced back over her shoulder. If anyone asks, you're waiting for a transport chair because of your condition, she winked. But if you make a scene that involves security, I never saw you. Thank you, I said, feeling a sudden fierce surge of gratitude for this stranger. Don't thank me, she muttered, pushing her cart away. Just give him hell. I hate cheaters. 22 minutes. I counted every single one. I paced a small circle near the elevators, my hands resting on my lower back. The pain was a dull roar now, but I ignored it. I was running on pure spite. When the elevator doors finally dinged and slid open, Keith stepped out. He looked like he had run a marathon in steel-toed boots. He was wearing dusty Carhartt pants and a neon yellow safety vest over a gray t-shirt. His face was streaked with what looked like drywall dust or dried sweat. He was holding a hard hat in one hand and his keys in the other. He scanned the hallway, his eyes frantic. When he landed on me, his shoulders dropped about 3 inches, but the tension in his jaw remained. Zoe, he said, rushing over. He smelled like sawdust and gasoline, a stark contrast to the antiseptic hospital air. Where is she? Is she hurt bad? He was still hoping. I could see it. He was hoping I was wrong. He was hoping she was the passenger in a friend's car. He was hoping it was a coincidence. She's in Bay 4, I said, skipping the pleasantries. She has a concussion and some cuts. She's awake. Okay, he exhaled, running a hand through his short, dark hair. Okay, and Otis? He was driving? Yes. Keith looked at me, searching for the lie, searching for the explanation that would make this okay. Why were they together, Zoe? He asked. His voice cracked. It was a sound so raw it made my own heart ache. She told me she was driving the Lexus to Savannah this morning. I kissed her goodbye at 6:00 a.m. Otis claims her car broke down, and he was giving her a ride to a mechanic, I said flatly. On I-75, heading north, away from the mechanic. Keith blinked. He was an engineer. He built things. He understood logistics. That doesn't make sense, he said. The Lexus was just serviced last month, and why would she be with him? Why not call AAA? Why not call me? Exactly, I said. And Keith? Yeah? I found a receipt in Otis's pocket from Pandora at Lenox Mall, time-stamped 12:45 p.m. today, for a silver heart charm. I watched the information hit him. It wasn't an explosion. It was an implosion. His face seemed to collapse inward. The confusion vanished, replaced by a dark, agonizing clarity. He looked down at his dirty boots. He gripped his hard hat so tight his knuckles turned white. She doesn't have a sister in Savannah, he whispered. Her sister lives in Charlotte. What? She said she was going to Savannah to see a friend from college, he corrected himself, looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed. But she took the overnight bag, the red one. Come on, I said, reaching out and touching his arm. It was rigid as a stone. Let's go ask them. We walked down the hall together. It was a strange procession, the pregnant wife and the construction worker husband. We looked like the start of a bad joke. Keith didn't stomp. He didn't run. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait. Thud, thud, thud. His boots were heavy on the linoleum. I walked a half step behind him. I felt like a general sending a soldier into battle, or maybe the grim reaper guiding a soul. The nurse in the pink scrubs was nowhere to be seen, true to her word. The hallway was quieter now, the shift change lull. We reached the curtain. It was still drawn, that gap I had left still there. I could hear murmuring inside, low, urgent whispers. They were getting their story straight. They were fixing the plot holes. Just stick to the mechanic's story, Otis was whispering. Keith won't know the difference. He's clueless about cars. But Zoe saw the receipt, Nina hissed back. What do we do about the receipt? I'll tell her I lost it. I'll buy another one for my mom and show it to her later. Gaslight her. She's pregnant. Everyone will think she's just crazy jealous. Keith stopped. He heard it. He heard his name. He heard clueless. I saw the muscles in his neck cord. A vein throbbed near his temple. He didn't hesitate this time. He didn't politely ask to enter. He grabbed the curtain with his free hand and ripped it back so hard the plastic rings snapped off the rail at the top, sending the fabric pooling onto the floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Otis jumped, letting out a yelp of pain as he jarred his broken arm. Nina shrieked, pulling the sheet up to her chin. They froze. It was a painting of guilt. Otis, pale and sweating. Nina, gray and trembling. And Keith, standing there in his neon vest, covered in the dust of the job he was working to pay for the house she lived in. Keith? Nina squeaked. Her voice was tiny. Honey? Otis turned 5 shades of white. He looked from Keith to me, then back to Keith. He saw the hard hat. He saw the boots. He saw the look in Keith's eyes. Hey, buddy, Otis started, his voice shaking. I can explain. Keith didn't yell. That was the scariest part. If he had yelled, it would have been a release. Instead, he walked into the room, placed his hard hat gently on the end of Nina's bed, and stood there. He loomed over them, not physically, but morally. You can explain? Keith asked. His voice was calm, conversational. Okay. Explain. Like I told Zoe, Otis stammered, his eyes darting to the door as if looking for an escape route. I was helping Nina. Her car Her car, Keith repeated. He turned to Nina. Nina, where is your car? It's on the side of the road, Nina lied, tears instantly springing to her eyes. She reached for his hand, but he took a step back. Keith, I was so scared. The engine just died and... Where? Keith asked. Where on the road? Near the exit. The Marietta exit. The Marietta exit on I-75 North? Keith clarified. Yes, exactly. Keith nodded slowly. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His hands were dirty, his fingernails rimmed with black grease. He tapped the screen. That's funny, he said, because I have the Lexus app on my phone. We share the account, remember? I set it up for you. Nina stopped crying. Her mouth hung open. And right now, Keith continued, looking at the screen, the app says the car is parked. Not on the side of I-75. It's parked in the long-term deck at Lenox Mall, Level 3, Row G. He turned the phone screen toward her. The map pin was unmoving. Did the car drive itself to the mall, Nina? Keith asked. And then, Keith turned to Otis. If you were picking her up from her broken-down car, why was her car at the mall? And why were you at the mall buying jewelry at the exact same time? Keith, look, man. Otis tried to sit up, putting on his salesman face. You're overthinking it. It's a coincidence. I met her there to help her with shopping. Shopping? Keith laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. You were helping my wife shop while I was pouring concrete in 90-degree heat? It's not what it looks like, Nina wailed. Zoe is putting ideas in your head. Zoe didn't have to put anything in my head, Keith said. He looked at me, a brief flash of solidarity, then back to his wife. Zoe told me the facts. You guys are filling in the rest. Why was your phone off, Nina? Keith asked, his voice dropping lower. I called you at noon to ask about the insurance bill. It went straight to voicemail. You never turn your phone off. Battery died, she whispered. Your phone is right there, Keith pointed to the bedside table, and it's at 84% battery. He picked up her phone. He didn't unlock it. He didn't have to. He just tapped the screen to wake it up. And look at that, he said. 3 missed calls from hubby and a text from... Oh. He held up the phone. The notification was on the lock screen. Oh, can't wait to see you. Leaving the office now. Time 12:15 p.m. Keith looked at Otis. Oh, Keith said. I wonder who that is. Otis closed his eyes. He stopped fighting. He slumped back against the pillows, the defeat radiating off him in waves. It's over, Keith said. He didn't sound angry anymore. He sounded exhausted. He sounded like a man who had just watched his house burn down and was staring at the ashes. It's just over. The silence that followed Keith's declaration, it's just over, wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine hull about to breach. Nina didn't take it well. The damsel in distress act crumbled, replaced by something uglier. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing snot and foundation across her cheek. You can't just say that, she shrilled, her voice cracking. Keith, you can't just walk in here and decide it's over because of a misunderstanding. I lost the baby. Wait, what? I froze. Keith froze. Even Otis looked confused. I could have. Nina corrected herself frantically, realizing she'd overshot the lie. I was in a crash, Keith. I could have died. And you're standing there worrying about a phone app? You're supposed to be my husband. She was pivoting, desperately, turning the aggression back on him. I am your husband, Keith said, his voice terrifyingly level. Which is why I know when you're lying. You do this thing with your eyes, Nina. You look up and to the left. I am not lying, she screamed. A nurse poked her head in from the hallway, frowning, but neither of us acknowledged her. Otis cleared his throat. He tried to sit up straighter, adjusting his sling. He decided to play the reasonable man card. Look, Keith, Otis said, lowering his voice to a bro-to-bro register. Let's all take a breath. I know how this looks. It looks bad, but we're men, right? We can talk about this outside. Let the girls calm down. The girls. I felt a vein in my forehead throb. Keith turned his head slowly toward Otis. He looked at Otis's broken arm, then at his face. "We aren't men in this scenario, Otis," Keith said. "You're the guy who was screwing my wife while yours was at home painting a nursery. Do not talk to me like we're buddies at a barbecue." Otis shrank back. "I just meant, we don't need to make a scene." "The scene is already made," Keith said. "The scene is you two in a hospital bed together." Keith turned back to Nina. He reached for his hard hat on the bed. "I'm going home," he said. "I'm going to pack a bag. I'll stay at the Motel 6 off the connector tonight. You can figure out how to get home." "No!" Nina scrambled to her knees, tangling herself in the IV line. The monitor beeped a warning. "Keith, stop! You can't leave me here." "Watch me," Keith said. He turned around. Nina was losing him. I could see the panic rising in her chest, a physical thing. She was watching her safety net, her mortgage payer, her stability, walk out the door. She needed a weapon, a hook. "I'm pregnant!" The scream tore through the room. Keith stopped. He was one step away from the curtain. His hand was freezing in midair. I stopped breathing. My hand instinctively went to my own belly, as if to protect my son from the words. Otis's eyes went wide, saucer wide. His mouth fell open. He looked at Nina with genuine shock. He didn't know. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of Otis's heart monitor, which had just sped up to a frantic tempo. Keith turned around slowly. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "What?" he whispered. "I'm pregnant," Nina sobbed, falling back against the pillows, covering her face with her hands. "I took the test this morning. That's why I was so emotional. That's why everything is a mess." She peeked through her fingers to see if it was working. "We were trying," she whimpered. "You wanted this, Keith. You said you wanted a family." It was a low blow, a dirty tactical nuke. I knew Keith wanted kids. Otis had made fun of him for it once, saying Keith was desperate to be a soccer dad. Keith stood there, swaying slightly. His face was a mask of conflict. The anger was warring with the deep-seated desire he'd carried for years. "Pregnant?" he repeated. "Since when?" I'm a few weeks along," she cried. "I was going to surprise you tonight. I had a onesie bought and everything." I watched Keith do the math. I saw his eyes narrow, scanning the calendar in his head. Then I looked at Otis. Otis wasn't doing happy math. Otis was doing terror math. He was pale, paler than the sheets. He was looking at Nina's stomach with a look of pure horror. "A few weeks," Keith said slowly. "Yes," Nina insisted. "It's a miracle, Keith. After all this time." "We haven't slept together in 6 weeks, Nina," Keith said. The sentence hung in the air like a guillotine blade. What?" Nina stammered. "Yes, we have. No," Keith said, his voice gaining strength. "I was on the night shift for the stadium project for 3 weeks. Then you had that migraine for a week. Then I was in Savannah for the site inspection. It's been 6 weeks, almost 7. I looked at Otis. He was trying to melt into the mattress. He was staring at the ceiling tiles, praying for spontaneous combustion. "Otis," I said. My voice was ice. He flinched. "Otis," I repeated. "When did you say your late nights at the office started? Was it about 2 months ago?" Otis didn't answer. He couldn't. "Nina," Keith said, stepping back toward the bed. "Who is the father?" "It's yours," Nina shrieked, but her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "Of course it's yours. Doctors get the dates wrong all the time." "I'm an engineer, Nina," Keith said. "I work with timelines. If you're a few weeks pregnant and I haven't touched you in 7 weeks..." He looked at Otis. Otis looked at me. And suddenly the room felt very, very crowded. There were 4 of us and 2 potential babies, one in my belly kicking my ribs. and one in Nina's, potentially sharing half its DNA with my son. The nausea hit me again, violent and sudden. "Is it his?" Keith asked. He pointed a dirty finger at Otis. "No!" Nina screamed. "No, no, no!" "Otis?" Keith barked. Otis looked like a trapped rat. I used protection. Most of the time." "Most of the time?" I whispered. "Oh my God," Keith said. He put his hands on his head, knocking his hard hat off the bed. It clattered to the floor, spinning on its plastic shell. "You used protection most of the time?" I repeated, my voice rising. "With our neighbor, while I am 8 months pregnant?" "It was just a few times," Otis yelled, finally snapping. "It wasn't a relationship. It was just stress relief." "Stress relief," Nina repeated, looking at him with betrayal. "You told me you loved me. You told me Zoe was boring and you felt trapped." "Shut up, Nina," Otis roared. "Both of you shut up," Keith shouted. It was the first time he raised his voice. It echoed off the linoleum walls. He looked at Nina. He looked at her belly. "You're lying about the dates," Keith said. "Or you're lying about the father. Either way, you're lying." "Keith, please," Nina begged, reaching out. "It's a baby. A baby changes everything. We can fix this." "A baby doesn't fix a lie, Nina," Keith said. "It just makes the lie last 18 years. He looked at Otis. "If that kid is yours," Keith said, his voice shaking with a dangerous calm, "you better pray I never see you outside this hospital." Otis swallowed hard. "It's not mine. She's probably lying about being pregnant, too. She lies about everything." "I am not lying," Nina wailed. "I have the test in my purse." Just as the tension reached a breaking point, just as I thought Keith might actually throttle Otis, the curtain ripped open again. But it wasn't a family member. It was a man in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck and an iPad in his hand. "Good afternoon, folks," he announced briskly, not looking up from his screen. "I'm Dr. Okoro. I need to check on Mr. Miller's circulation in that arm and assess Ms. Caldwell's pupillary response." He stepped into the middle of the carnage, completely oblivious, or maybe he just didn't care. "I need visitors to step out," he said, finally looking up. He saw Keith's red face. He saw my tear-streaked cheeks. He saw Nina sobbing. He paused. "Unless this is a medical emergency," he added dryly. "It's an emergency," I said, "but not the kind you can fix." "Right," Dr. Okoro said. He pointed to the door. "Please, I need to do my rounds. You can come back in 10 minutes. It broke the momentum. The bubble of rage popped, leaving just a stale, flat exhaustion. Keith looked at Nina one last time. She was looking at him with those big, wet eyes, pleading. "Don't come back," Keith said to her. "I mean it." "Don't come back to the apartment." "Keith!" "Step out, sir," the doctor ordered. Keith turned on his heel. He grabbed my arm, gentle but firm. "Let's go, Zoe," he said. I looked at Otis. He was avoiding my gaze, pretending to be fascinated by the doctor's name tag. "I'll see you in court, Otis," I said, and then we walked out. We didn't stop in the hallway. We didn't stop in the waiting room. We walked straight to the elevators, rode them down in silence, and walked out the automatic sliding doors into the humid Atlanta evening. The rain had stopped, but the ground was wet and black. The air smelled of ozone and wet concrete. I stopped near the pickup lane. My legs were trembling so bad I thought I might fall over. "Where's your car?" Keith asked. His voice was rough, like he'd been swallowing gravel. "Level P4, I said. "Where's yours?" "I took an Uber," he said. "I left my truck at the site. I was in such a rush." He trailed off. He looked at the empty space where a car should be, and then he broke. It wasn't a scream, it was a collapse. He bent over at the waist, hands on his knees, and let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "She's pregnant," he choked out. "She's pregnant, Zoe. We tried for 3 years. 3 years of negative tests. 3 years of ovulation kits." He stood up, wiping his face aggressively with his dirty sleeve. And now she's pregnant. With him. He pointed vaguely up at the hospital tower. I watched him unravel. This strong, steady man who built skyscrapers was falling apart in a parking lot. "Keith," I said. "I'm sorry," he said, turning away. "I shouldn't. You're the one dealing with. You're pregnant too. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing," I said. I felt something shift inside me. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. What was left was something cold and hard. Steel. "You need a ride?" I asked. He looked at me. "I can't go home. She'll be there eventually. Or her stuff will be there." "I'm not going home either," I said. "I'm going to pack a bag and get a hotel. But first..." I reached into my purse and pulled out my keys. "First, we are going to get you a drink, or a burger, or something that isn't hospital air." "Zoe, you're 8 months pregnant," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You can't drink." "No," I said, unlocking the Honda. "But I can watch you drink, and we can plot." "Plot? Revenge," I said. "Or justice. Whatever you want to call it." Keith looked at me. Really looked at me. He saw the steel. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." We got into the car, the Mom Mobile. As I pulled out of the parking deck, leaving Otis and Nina behind in their shared room of lies, I realized something strange. My husband wasn't alone in that car crash, but I wasn't alone anymore either. I dropped Keith off at a Motel 6 off I-85. He looked like a refugee from his own life, standing under the flickering neon sign with nothing but a plastic bag of toiletries we'd bought at CVS and his hard hat. He waved once, a grim, sharp chop of his hand, and turned away. When I got back to the apartment, it was 8 p.m. The door unlocked with a cheerful beep of the smart lock Otis had installed 2 months ago. "So you never have to fumble for keys," he'd said. He loved gadgets. He loved convenience. I stepped inside. The apartment was silent. Not peaceful silent. Dead silent. The air conditioning hummed, circulating the smell of the slow cooker roast I had started at 10:04 a.m. It smelled like savory beef and rosemary. It smelled like a home. I walked into the kitchen and unplugged the crock pot. I didn't take the lid off. I just picked up the entire ceramic pot, hot and heavy, walked to the trash can, and dumped it. The meat slid out with a wet schlump. Then I walked to the nursery. The yellow onesie was still on the floor where I had dropped it. It looked like a crime scene marker. I picked it up. The bamboo cotton was still soft. I folded it. Then I unfolded it. Then I ripped it. It was harder than I thought to rip fabric, but I found a seam at the neck and pulled until the thread snapped. I tore it in half. Then I tore the halves. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the ruins of a $30 shirt, and I waited for the tears. But they didn't come. The only thing I felt was a need to organize, to purge. I stood up and went to the hallway closet. I grabbed a box of heavy-duty black contractor bags. "Okay," I said to the empty room, "let's move." I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Otis reaching across the gap between the hospital beds. By 7 a.m. Sunday, the living room looked like a loading dock. I had cleared out every trace of Otis from the common areas, his golf clubs, his collection of vintage whiskey glasses, the framed photo of us in Maui from the mantel. I was currently on the phone with American Express. "I need to remove an authorized user," I told the representative, putting the phone on speaker while I taped up a box labeled "His Junk, Hucka." "Certainly, ma'am. Is the user deceased, or is this a separation?" "He's not dead," I said, ripping a strip of packing tape with my teeth. "Though he probably wishes he was. It's a separation." "I see. And you want to freeze the joint account as well?" "Freeze it, drain it, burn it," I said. "I want his card declined if he tries to buy a stick of gum. Can you do that?" "I can put a hold on all transactions pending primary authorization," the rep said, sounding slightly terrified. "Do it. And while I have you, can you check the last transaction on the supplementary card ending in 4022? One moment. Looks like a charge pending from yesterday. Pandora Jewelry." $65.10. Dispute it, I said. Ma'am, you want to dispute the charge? Yes. Mark it as fraudulent, I said, tossing Otis's Xbox controller into the bag with a satisfying thud, because the man who bought it was pretending to be a husband. He didn't come home until Monday afternoon. I was sitting in the armchair, the only piece of furniture I had left in the living room besides the coffee table. I was drinking herbal tea. I heard the cab pull up. I heard the heavy door slam. I heard his footsteps in the breezeway, uneven, dragging. The door beeped. Beep, boop, click. Otis walked in. He looked terrible. His arm was in a proper cast now, black fiberglass, slung tight against his chest. His face was a map of bruising, yellow and purple blooming under his left eye. He was wearing the same clothes from the accident, stiff with dried sweat and blood specks. He looked up, expecting, I don't know what. Sympathy? Anger? A nurse? He stopped when he saw the room. The walls were bare. The hooks where our wedding photos used to hang were just tiny, pockmarked holes in the drywall. The rug was gone. The TV was gone. Stacked against the far wall were 6 black garbage bags and 3 boxes. Zoe, he rasped. He sounded small. Your keys, I said, pointing to the coffee table. Zoe, baby, please, he started, shuffling forward. He tried to smile, but his split lip made it look like a sneer. Can we just... I haven't slept. I'm in pain. Can I just sit down? You can sit on your boxes, I said. Or you can leave. Those are your options. You can't kick me out, he said, a flash of the old arrogance trying to spark. This is my apartment too. My name is on the lease. Actually, I said, taking a sip of tea, I spoke to the leasing office this morning. I showed them the police report. And I showed them the clause in our lease about illegal activity on the premises. Did you know reckless driving endangering a minor, me, counts as a violation? It was a bluff, a total bluff. But Otis didn't read leases, he signed them. You're kicking me out? He asked, his voice cracking. With a broken arm? I'm not kicking you out, Otis, I said. I'm releasing you. You wanted to be free, right? You wanted excitement. You wanted the thrill of the chase. Well, congratulations, you're single. Go chase. He dropped his bag, the plastic patient bag from the hospital. He sank onto one of the boxes labeled shoes. It wasn't a relationship, he whispered, staring at the floor. It was just... She was there. She was available. I was freaking out about the baby, Zoe. I was scared. I felt like my life was ending. So you decided to blow it up instead? I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. The classic cheater's anthem. I love you. No, I said. I stood up. My back hurt. My feet were swollen, but I felt 10 feet tall. You love the way I organize your life. You love that I cook. You love that I make you look like a stable adult. I picked up the manila envelope from the table. Here, I said, tossing it onto his lap. He flinched as it hit his good leg. What is this? 3 things, I listed. 1, a copy of the divorce petition. My lawyer filed it electronically an hour ago. 2, a printout of the text messages between you and Nina that Keith downloaded from her cloud backup before he locked her out of the account. You guys were really graphic for just stress relief, by the way. Otis turned gray. And 3, I said. He opened the envelope. He pulled out the glossy black and white square, the ultrasound from last week, the 3D one where you could see the baby's nose, Otis's nose. His hand shook. He stared at the picture of his son. He kicked all night, I said softly. While you were lying in that hospital bed lying to my face, he was awake. He knows, Otis. I swear to God, he knows. Zoe. Tears started to leak out of his eyes. Real tears this time. Tears of loss. Take your boxes, I said. My brother is coming over in 20 minutes to help me move the rest of the furniture. If you're still here, he's going to finish what the airbag started. Otis looked at me. He saw the wall. He saw the steel. He stood up, clutching the envelope and the ultrasound to his chest like a shield. He didn't argue. He grabbed the handle of the nearest garbage bag with his good hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. "While you were lying, I learned to live. Now get out." Update. It's been 3 months since the hospital. The new apartment is smaller. It's a 2-bedroom walk-up in Decatur, near the square. It doesn't have a doorman, and the floors creak, but it has a massive window in the living room that lets in the morning sun. I was sitting on the floor of the second bedroom, tightening the last screw on the crib with an Allen wrench. My belly was gone. In its place was a bassinet in the corner with a sleeping, grunty bundle of joy named Leo. Leo arrived 2 weeks early, just to keep me on my toes. I did the labor alone. Well, my mom was there, holding one leg, and a terrifyingly efficient midwife was holding the other, but I did the pushing. I didn't need Otis's hand to squeeze. I squeezed the bed rail until I bent the metal. It was hard. The nights are hard. The feeding schedule is a form of torture designed by nature. But it's quiet. There's no lying. There's no wondering who is texting at 10 us on PM. There's no perfume on shirts that shouldn't be there. I stood up, testing the crib rail. It was solid. Rock solid. I walked over to the window. Outside, the leaves were turning gold. Fall in Atlanta. I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mom had gone back to Savannah yesterday. I walked to the door, checking the peephole. It was Keith. I opened the door. He looked different. The neon vest was gone. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt and dark jeans. He had lost weight, but he looked clearer. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. "Hey," he said. He was holding a brown paper bag that smelled like pastries. "Hey," I said. "You found the place." "Your mom gave me the address," he admitted. "I hope that's okay." "It's okay. Come in." "Shh. Leo is down for a nap." He stepped inside, moving with that careful, quiet grace of a big man trying not to make noise. He looked around the small apartment. He nodded approvingly at the lack of clutter. We went to the kitchen. He put the bag on the counter. "Bear claws," he said. "From that bakery you like on Ponce." You remembered. "I remember a lot of things," he said. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "So, the divorce?" "Finalized next week," I said. "Otis didn't contest anything. Guilt is a powerful negotiator." "Nina is contesting everything," Keith said with a wry smile. "She wants the house. She wants alimony. She wants the dog we don't have." "And the baby?" I asked. The question that had been hanging between us for months. "She had the baby last week," Keith said. "A girl. And the DNA test came back yesterday." My heart hammered. "And?" Keith took a breath. "She's mine. Biologically, the timeline. I guess there was that one weekend before the migraine started." "Oh," I said. I felt a weird mix of relief and sadness. "So, you're a dad?" "I am," he said. "And so is Otis. To your boy." "Technically," I said, "though he hasn't seen Leo yet. He sends checks, but he can't look me in the eye." Keith nodded. He looked at the floor, then up at me. His eyes were intense. "Look, Zoe, here's the thing. My daughter, she's going to have a mom who is a mess, a mom who lies. And your son, he's going to have a dad who is a ghost." He took a step closer. "I'm not asking for anything crazy," he said. "But these kids, they're connected. By the wreckage and by us." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a crude drawing, a schedule. "I was thinking," he said. "Saturday mornings, I take my girl, you take Leo. We go to the park. We let them know each other. We let them know that family isn't just about who signed the birth certificate. It's about who shows up." I looked at the paper. Park day, zoo day, pizza night. "You want a co-parent?" I asked, smiling. "With a neighbor?" "I want to build something," Keith said. "Something real. We both got burned down to the foundation, Zoe. but the foundation is still there. We can build a new house, a weird patchwork house, but a strong one. He held out his hand, not a romantic gesture, a partner's gesture. What do you say? I looked at his hand, rough, calloused, honest. I thought about Otis and his empty life. I thought about Nina and her web of lies. Then I thought about Leo sleeping in the other room and Keith's little girl who deserved a chance. I took his hand. I say you better have brought napkins for those bear claws, I said. Keith smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. I brought a whole stack, he said. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding hands over a bag of pastries, ready to start the messy, beautiful work of reconstruction. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.